Hey guys, in today's lecture we'll be discussing rhetoric. Now, in the words of J.A. Cudden, rhetoric is the art of using language for persuasion in speaking and writing, especially in oratory. So, when you use language to sway public opinion to your favor, then that is known as rhetoric. When you use language to persuade someone to do something for you, then that is also rhetoric. It is one and the same. And rhetoric exists in both speaking as well as in writing, though it is more pronounced in oratory or public speaking. Aristotle, the famous Greek philosopher, in his work Rhetoric, focuses on how a successful orator can sway the public opinion in his favor. So, Aristotle, the famous Greek philosopher, wrote a work named Rhetoric, and in it, he talks about how a successful orator can sway the public opinion in his favor. Now, classical rhetoricians defined rhetoric as a discourse that influences the audience's opinion in such a way that they automatically agree with the orator's point of view. So, that was how the classical rhetoricians perceived rhetoric. Okay, the classical rhetoricians defined rhetoric as a discourse. It was a kind of discourse which happened between a speaker and a listener, a speaker and an audience. And when the rhetorician makes this discourse, it influences the audience's opinion in such a way that they automatically agree with the orator's point of view or the speaker's point of view. So, when a speaker, using his rhetoric, put forth his point of view, then the listener or the audience may automatically agree with whatever the speaker says. However, the Roman rhetorician Quintilian gave rhetoric a moral basis by defining it as an art of a good man skilled in speaking. So far, when we discussed about rhetoric, the focus was on swaying public opinion or swaying one's opinion to another person's favor, and even the classical rhetoricians considered rhetoric as a discourse which influences the audience's opinion in such a way that they automatically agree with the orator's point of view. So it shows that the orator can, in one way or the other, manipulate the audience's point of view. So it has got a bit of a negative shade. But Quintilian, the Roman rhetorician, defined rhetoric as an art of a good man skilled in speaking. So, rhetoric in the hands of a good man is something which is good. That is why he said that rhetoric is the art of a good man skilled in speaking. So, he gave it a moral dimension by stating that rhetoric is the art of a good man skilled in speaking. So, if a good man is also a seasoned rhetorician, then he can sway the public opinion in taking good decisions. That is why he said that, that is why Quintilian said that rhetoric is the art of a good man skilled in speaking. Moving on, during the classical era, rhetoric was considered as an important discipline. It was studied along with logic and grammar. Now, the important works associated with rhetoric are Aristotle's Art of Rhetoric, Quintilian's De Institutiono Oratoria, or The Education of an Orator. Quintilian, as I said, was a rhetorician, so he wrote De Institutiono Oratoria, or The Education of an Orator. Cicero's De Inventione, De Optimo Generare Oratorium, and De Oratore. Cicero, again a seasoned rhetorician, wrote 3 works: De Inventione, De Optimo Generare Oratore, and De Oratore. And Longinus's On the Sublime also deals with the topic of rhetoric. As I said, rhetoric can be perceived in both speech as well as in writing. And when Longinus talked about a sublime, he discussed about rhetoric too. Now, there are 5 parts to any rhetorical discourse. Before moving on to that, let me add one more point. Now, the influence of rhetoric extended even to the Middle Ages. As I said, in the classical ages, people studied 3 subjects in the universities. Now, at that time, there was no constructed universities anywhere, but they studied anyhow. And there were academies, for that matter, to teach people. And in these academies, they taught grammar, logic, and rhetoric. These were the 3 major subjects which were taught in the classical academies. And during the Middle Ages, it was given a name, which is trivium. So, in the Middle Ages, people were taught logic, grammar, and rhetoric, and this particular subject combination was given a name, which is trivium. Now, rhetorical discourses are systematically divided into 5 constituent parts. So, in any rhetorical discourse, in any kind of rhetoric, there are 5 constituent parts. One is inventio or invention. Now, at this stage, in the inventio or invention stage, and it is the first part of the rhetorical discourse, here what happens is that the orator discovers valid arguments. So, oratory or rhetoric is often based on valid arguments, right? If you don't have valid arguments or proofs to prove your arguments, then your speech or oratory would fall short. You need to have valid arguments, and it should be supported by valid proofs. So, the first part of rhetoric is inventio or invention. And here, the orator makes a discovery of valid arguments. The second part is dispositio or disposition, which is the arrangement of valid arguments. So, when you arrange valid arguments, then that is known as dispositio or disposition. The third part concerns with expression, on how you express these thoughts and ideas, how you arrange words, what are the kind of words that you choose, the choice of words, the style in which you are going to present them. So it is more on expression. The third part is known as elocutio or style. So in elocution competitions, they check whether you are uttering a particular speech with style. Remember it that way. And the fourth part is memoria or memory. So even if you have chosen the best topics, the best valid arguments, you have arranged it pretty well in the disposition or disposition stage, and you have chosen the right words and you have chosen the right style, again, if you don't have memory or if you don't know how to memorize your entire speech, then everything is going to turn topsy-turvy. So memory or memorization is also essential for rhetoric. And the last and final part when it comes to rhetoric is pronunciatio or delivery. Now in pronunciatio or delivery, the focus is on how you deliver your speech, the kind of accent that you can use, the rise and falling intonation, the stress, everything is given importance in pronunciatio or delivery. It is all about how you deliver the speech. Now let's take a detailed look at each of these constituent parts of rhetorical discourse. So, the first part was inventio or invention. Here, the orator finds the relevant material suitable for his arguments, and he also finds proofs. So, in inventio or invention is the finding of relevant material suited for arguments and proofs. So, you need to provide your arguments with proofs. Only then will the people believe you. If you simply make arguments without proving them with proofs, nowadays everything needs proof, right? So if you just make arguments without any valid proof, then it would fall short. So the first stage in rhetoric is finding relevant material suited for arguments and proofs. The second stage is dispositio or disposition. It is the arrangement or organization of material into coherent units. So in dispositio or disposition stage, as in writing, here too, we organize this collected materials in a coherent manner, in coherent units. What should you say, speak first? First, you need to address the audience and everybody on the dais. And first, you need to address everyone on the dais. Second, you need to focus on the audience. And then you need to introduce the topic and then you need to speak about it. So, there is an arrangement to all these arguments, right? And even when you are putting forth your argument, like the famous, like in the famous speech of Mark Antony, he put forth each and every argument in a very persuasive manner. So what he does is that first he addresses the senators, then he addresses the audience, then he one by one states the negatives of Caesar, but it appears as though he is also stating the positives. So he presents his arguments with proof in a coherent manner, and arranging it in a coherent manner is dispositio or disposition. Now the third part of the discourse, rhetorical discourse, is elocutio or style, and it indicates the suitable manner of presenting. It also includes the choice of words and verbal patterns. So when you make speeches, you need to be sure on choosing the right words for making the speeches. So choice of words is important, as well as the verbal patterning is also important. How you arrange them is also important. Now again, the kind of words that you can use for speech. You can use three different styles for making a speech. One is the grand style, where you use grandiloquent expression, epic similes and the like. So if you have ever listened to the speeches of the likes like Suma Redukod, he used to make grandiloquent expressions and very literary language, etc. Then comes the middle or mean style, where an ordinary person will be able to understand whatever the speaker speaks, as well as a person belonging to an erudite person, or the person belonging to an upper class will be able to understand what the person speaks. That is the middle or mean style. And then comes the low or plain style, where the speaker often resorts to conversational tone, where he just speaks with the audience as if it is a conversation. It is a one-to-one conversation. He just speaks with the audience using a rather conversational tone. Now, usually politicians at the time of elections use this low or plain style of rhetoric, where they'll be able to address a larger range of audience by adapting to a conversational tone. Moving on, the fourth constituent part of the rhetorical discourse is memory. And in this part, it gives memory or memoria, gives guidance on how to memorize a speech. Now, often the trainers would also, or seasoned orators might say that just before making a speech, you should rehearse in front of a mirror. So it's like a tip that you get. So in memoria gives guidance on how to memorize a speech. You can just make a speech or rehearse it in front of a mirror, or you can write the major points down in a small note and then keep it, so that at the time you would just take a look at it and then you will be able to deliver it. And the last and final part, which is of utmost importance, is delivery. So even if you are able to remember it, because the most troublesome part is remembering the entire speech, and after that you need to also focus on delivering the speech, right? And how you focus on pronunciation. So you cannot make it fall flat. Sometimes people might just read the entire speech from the piece of paper that's right in front of them, and it would be rather monotonous, and without the right pronunciation, rising or falling accent, then it would all appear rather awkward. So it's always better to deliver the speech using the right pronunciation, using the right accent, stress patterns, and rising and falling intonations. So that's up with delivery. Now moving on, again, you can classify rhetoric or types of rhetoric as three. There are three types of oratory. There are three types of rhetoric, or three kinds of rhetoric. One is deliberative oratory. Now, in deliberative oratory, the speaker tries to convince the audience, such as a constituent assembly, on the issues that relate to public policy. Here, the orator tries to persuade or dissuade the audience to take or not to take an action. The audience can either approve or disapprove. So, deliberative oratory happens in constituent assemblies. Now, what happens is that in constituent assemblies, often the politicians makes a speech and it relates to a public policy. They present a public policy. And here, the speaker either tries to persuade the audience to make a vote in his favor, or he tries to dissuade the audience from choosing a particular bill. So he either tries to persuade the audience or he tries to dissuade the person either to take action or not to take action. So he may persuade the audience's favor to his opinion and make them take a particular action, or he may dissuade the person and ask them not to take that action because it would eventually lead to more trouble. So he can either persuade the audience or dissuade the audience into taking an action or not taking an action at all. Now, in deliberative oratory, the audience has a role. The audience has got an agency. That is, they can listen to their deliberative oratory because they know that this is, after all, a deliberative oratory. That the politician is trying to do is try to persuade the audience's opinion to his favor. So here, the audience has got an agency. They can either agree to whatever the speaker said, or they can choose not to agree with whatever that the speaker says. The second type of oratory is forensic oratory. Now, as the term itself indicates, it has something to do with the judicial system and with the sense of justice and injustice. So, in forensic oratory or judicial rhetoric is a speech or writing that considers justice or injustice of a certain charge or accusation. Suppose you are accused of something. Suppose you are accused of stealing. And there is a certain charge which has been put on you. And a lawyer might come and make a forensic oratory and sway the judge's opinion or the jury's opinion to your favor, right? So it pertains more or less to justice and injustice. Forensic oratory or judicial oratory is a speech or writing that considers justice or injustice of a certain charge or accusation. So here the lawyer is trying to weigh the justice and injustice in a certain charge or accusation. Sometimes a person might be charged for no reason at all, and at other times he might be guilty. So the lawyer here weighs the justice and injustice on a particular charge, and then he makes a deliberate speech, and then he makes a speech before the justice or before the members of the jury and try to sway their opinion, and it happens in a court setting. So in modern era, judicial discourse is primarily employed by lawyers in trials decided by judge or jury. So forensic oratory often occurs in judicial discourse, and it is often employed. It is often used by lawyers in trials which are decided by the judge as well as the jury. So here, if a matter is put in front of the court, if there is some kind of a conflict, then when it is put in front of the court, it is the judge who decides where the justice lies. But when it comes to foreign countries, it is the jury who decides where the justice lies. So if you have seen certain movies like The Provoked, then you know that there a matter of contention is decided by the jury or the members of the jury. Or if you have ever read Harper Lee's How to Kill a Mockingbird, there too, when an Afro-American is put to trial, it is the members of the jury who decides whether he is guilty or not guilty. Okay, so the case will be presented before the members of a jury, and the members of the jury may contain ordinary citizens, like it may contain teachers, or principals, or bank professionals, people belonging to that particular province, mostly educated ones, and they will be asked to uh, plead a person as guilty or not guilty. So, in such a scenario, the onus of proving a person guilty or not guilty lies with the lawyer. Now he needs to make use of his forensic oratory or his oratorial skills when he is weighing or when he is trying to prove that justice or injustice lies with a particular case. So if a person is unjustly charged of a particular crime, then he may weigh the justice as well as the injustice on that charge or accusation which is put against him, and try to sway the jury's opinion in his favor. And it happens in forensic oratory, and it happens in a court like setting. Now, moving on to the last and final type of oratory, kind of oratory, which is epidactic oratory. Now, it is a display rhetoric. Now, in this type of rhetoric, there will be a master of ceremonies who will use his rhetorical skill, or who will display his rhetorical skill to elaborate on the merits and demerits of a person, right? And this epidactic oratory often occurs in marriages, at the time of marriages, especially in the West. So usually they would have a best man and a bridesmaid, and the best man is supposed to make a speech in front of the larger crowd, and here he will be trying to speak about the merits of a person. Hmm? And at times, if the person is close to him, he may even point out the demerits of a person, but usually it is he will be talking about the merit of the person. And the epidactic oratory is also employed by master of ceremonies, where he invite people to the stage by stating their merits as well as the demerits. And one of the major things about epidactic oratory is that it is display rhetoric, where the rhetorician is trying to display his talents in public speaking, and it is often employed in ceremonial occasions like marriages. So I've included all these pictures for you to remember all these kinds of rhetorics. The first is deliberative rhetoric, and it is often done in constituent assemblies by a seasoned politician to persuade or dissuade the public opinion to his favor. And then there is the forensic oratory or judicial oratory, and it is often employed by the lawyers, where they weigh upon the justice and injustices of a particular case or a charge against an accused. And the third type is epidactic oratory or display rhetoric, where a person would be talking about the merits and demerits of a person. And here the highlight is on the rhetorician's rhetorical talent. It is often employed in ceremonies. That's all about rhetoric, and I hope that you were able to understand the entire concept. Just go through the notes that I've given you. Thank you. Take care.